Welcome, curious minds, to the deep dive. Today we're going to embark on a really fascinating journey. We're exploring a question that, well, it resonates with every single one of us, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
It's that question we start grappling with almost from the moment we can speak. Who am I?
Such a fundamental human inquiry.
Exactly. And what's truly fascinating, I think, is how our understanding of ourselves isn't static. It's not this fixed thing carved in stone.
Well,
It's, constantly being built piece by intricate piece, story by evolving story, basically throughout our entire lives. It's this ongoing, dynamic process of self-creation.
Constantly unfolding.
So, in this deep dive, we're turning our spotlight onto a truly unique and incredibly rich area, adoptive identity.
Yeah.
It offers such a profound, insightful lens, really, through which to explore those broader concepts of self, meaning-making, and psychological development. It gives us a clearer picture of how individuals construct their sense of who they are in the world.
It really does.
And for someone like you, listening in, maybe with a background in elementary education and a new interest in identity and psychology, well, this dive is going to be particularly illuminating
We think so, yeah.
because it'll provide incredible, nuanced insights into how individual narratives get formed right from the very earliest stages of life,
Mm-hmm.
and how we, as educators or just as curious people, can better understand and support that foundational process for all children.
Mm-hmm. Understanding those threads.
It's about recognizing the intricate threads that weave together a child's sense of self. Yeah.
And our mission today really is to truly unpack the complex layers of what it means to construct an identity as an adopted person.
Okay.
And to guide us, we'll be drawing from a pretty significant source, excerpts from the Handbook of Identity Theory and Research.
That sounds quite comprehensive.
It is. It's not just a casual read. It's a robust academic foundation that offers a deep, evidence-based understanding of identity. So our goal is to distill the key insights from this work, helping you understand the very active, intentional process adopted individuals often undertake.
Active and intentional.
Exactly. How they reflect on their lives, how they actively take steps to gather crucial information, whether it's about their origins, their family history, their place in the world, and how they ultimately weave all of that into a cohesive, meaningful narrative about themselves.
Right? About their relationships, their families, their culture.
All of it. It's really about understanding the unique architecture of their self-story.
That's a great way to put it. Because while all of us, adopted or not, are constantly constructing stories about our origins,
Well, I'll do it.
often through narratives our families share, refined by our experiences, well, for adopted individuals, certain pieces of that narrative might initially be missing. Or they might take on a vastly different form than what society typically expects.
Different starting points.
Think about those standard questions, right? Where did you get your curly hair? Who do you look like? For adopted individuals, these common questions can carry a different weight, a different kind of meaning.
Yeah, they land differently.
So this deep dive is all about exploring how adopted individuals navigate these unique circumstances, these different starting points, to answer that profound, often lifelong question, what does being adopted mean to me?
And crucially.
And how does this fit into my understanding of myself, my relationships, my family, and my culture? It's a journey of profound self-discovery, often requiring a unique form of narrative artistry.
That's a good term for it, narrative artistry.
Okay, so let's unpack this core concept first. What exactly is adoptive identity?
Right, let's get specific.
When we talk about adopted identity, we're really looking at two fundamental interconnected questions. The first is, who am I as an adopted person?
Beyond just the label.
Exactly. It's about the internal experience of that status. And the second question, building right on the first, is what does being adopted mean to me? And how does this fit into my understanding of myself, relationships, family, and culture?
The meaning-making part.
Yeah. And it's crucial to understand that it's more than just knowing a few facts about your birth or your family history, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely not.
Yeah.
It's profoundly about the story one constructs with all that information. Or, perhaps just as importantly, with the questions that arise from the lack of it.
Right. The gaps can be part of the story, too.
Definitely. It's the personal meaning they make of their unique beginning.
So it's not just data points.
Precisely. It's not merely an inventory of data points or, historical record.
Yeah.
At its heart, identity, especially adoptive identity, is about meaning-making.
That human drive.
That deeply human drive to understand one's place The narrative approach to adoptive identity development emphasizes how an adoptee's personal story, their internal narrative, is actively and socially constructed.
Actively constructed, okay.
It's a dynamic process, one that involves continual reflection and integration, helping the individual find their place and understand their fit in the complex tapestry of the world around them. It's like the ongoing creation of their personal mythology.
Mythology, I like that. So what's the key process here? You mentioned steps.
Yeah, the key process of building this narrative involves 3 distinct yet deeply interconnected steps. First, adopted persons reflect deeply on the meaning of adoption in their own lives.
Okay, reflection first.
They ponder its significance, its impact, its joys, its challenges. This reflection isn't passive, it's an active internal dialogue.
Right.
Second, they actively take steps to gather information that will enhance this understanding.
Actively seeking it out.
Right. This could be anything from a child asking their adoptive parents seemingly simple questions like, "Why did my first mommy give me away?" To an adult actively searching for birth relatives, historical records, or medical information.
A whole range of actions.
A whole range. And finally, with this deep reflection and the information they've gathered, they construct a meaningful and coherent narrative about themselves. This narrative is their personal truth, their lived experience of being adopted.
And the quality of that narrative is really important, isn't it? It's not just about having a story.
No, definitely not.
But about how well put together, how robust, how internally consistent it is. It sounds like this coherence is vital for psychological well-being.
Exactly. You hit the nail on the head. A highly developed narrative, one that truly serves the individual, is internally consistent.
Meaning
the different parts of their story, the facts they know, the feelings they experience, the experiences they've had, they all fit together logically and emotionally. It's a story that rings true to them.
Got it.
It also reflects multiple points of view, acknowledging and integrating the perspectives of adoptive parents, birth parents, maybe other significant people involved in their journey, rather than dismissing them.
So embracing the complexity.
Yes. And crucially, it's a narrative that has been developed through a deep and often challenging process of exploration and reflection. This coherence isn't just a nice-to-have. It's the very foundation of an adopted individual's sense of self-worth and resilience.
Wow.
A coherent narrative enables them to navigate the world with internal clarity, even when external facts are sparse or complex. It allows them to feel whole, even if parts of their historical record remain unknown. It provides a stable internal compass.
That's a powerful idea. And for you, listening as someone interested in elementary education, think about this in your future classroom.
Yeah, this connection is important.
Children are constantly forming narratives about themselves and their families. They tell stories during show and tell, draw pictures of their homes, talk about where they come from, who belongs to them.
All the time.
For some children, as we're discussing today, these foundational stories might have unique complexities, perhaps due to adoption or other family structures. Understanding that it's about meaning-making, about constructing a personal narrative.
Not just facts.
Right, not just memorizing facts or following some prescribed family mold. That can provide a profound framework for how you approach discussions about family or personal history in your classroom.
It really shifts the perspective.
It ensures you're sensitive to these varied experiences, empowering every child to tell their story in a way that feels authentic and coherent to them. Maybe instead of just a family tree, think about a family story web or a life journey map, things that allow for broader, more inclusive narratives.
That's a great practical idea. Okay, so moving into the diverse worlds of adoption is absolutely crucial for understanding adoptive identity.
Because adoption isn't just one thing.
Not at all. The term adoption is incredibly broad, a vast umbrella encompassing vastly different circumstances that profoundly impact how an individual develops their identity.
Right.
It's critical to understand both the commonalities and the significant differences across these types, because each presents a unique backdrop for identity formation. It shapes the questions an adoptee might ask, the challenges they might face.
So what's a big challenge in one type might be totally different in another.
Exactly. What might be a core identity challenge in one type of adoption could be entirely absent or take a vastly different form in another, which makes that one-size-fits-all approach to identity support truly inadequate.
It really highlights that there's no single adopted person experience, does it? There's no archetype.
None at all.
Let's dive into these 4 predominant types and the unique identity challenges they present. First up, we have domestic adoption of infants.
Right. So in this scenario, infants are placed for adoption within their countries of origin. Most commonly, this is because birth parents, often young, maybe still in school or facing significant economic or social limitations, feel they can't provide the resources or home they desire for their child.
So it's typically seen as a voluntary placement?
Generally, yes. It means the birth parents make the conscious decision to place their child for adoption, and we've seen a significant shift over the decades here.
From closed to open.
Exactly. Moving from what were called closed adoptions, where there was no identifying information about birth relatives, often no contact at all, to increasingly open adoptions.
And open can mean different things, right?
It can. It allows for varying degrees of contact between the adoptive family and both relatives, maybe just letters exchanged through an agency, or it could be direct ongoing relationships. Advocates for open adoption often cite the facilitation of identity development as a key advantage.
Because of access to origins?
Primarily, yes. Access to origins and those ongoing connections.
So what are the specific identity challenges here, especially thinking back to those earlier closed adoptions where information was intentionally withheld?
Yeah, for individuals from closed adoptions, the core struggles often revolve around missing origin information. In Western society, we are so heavily oriented toward biological ties.
Totally. Family resemblance, medical history.
Right. Think about the common conversations about family resemblances, shared talents, or the crucial role of family medical histories and genetic predispositions in healthcare. Knowing nothing or very little of one's origins in that context can create significant identity-relevant concerns, a palpable blank space in their personal history.
So what does that look like?
Well, the most common issues include searching, which can range from simply looking for non-identifying information about birth relatives to actively seeking out the relatives themselves later in life.
And that search is more than just facts.
Oh, much more. It's often a deep psychological quest for self-understanding. Then there's the complex process of forging an identity as a member of two families, their birth family, however unknown, and their adoptive family. Finding a way to integrate these dual allegiances and narratives into a coherent whole. It's a continuous balancing act.
You know, for an elementary education major listening, this really brings to mind how you might handle a common classroom activity like creating a family tree.
Oh, yeah. That can be tricky.
A child from a closed adoption might experience that project very differently, feeling a profound blank or sense of exclusion compared to one from an open adoption who might excitedly share about both sets of parents or a non-adopted child.
Huge difference.
It just underscores the profound need for sensitivity, for finding ways to make all children feel seen, valued, included, regardless of their family structure. Maybe instead of a tree, thinking about family constellations or circles of belonging could be more inclusive.
I love those alternatives.
Okay.
Okay, next up, domestic adoption from the public child welfare system. This is a very different context, often born out of crisis.
Okay.
Here, children are removed from their homes by the child welfare system because parents are judged unfit due to severe abuse and neglect.
So not voluntary placement.
Generally not, no.
Mhm.
There are often attempts at family reunification first, with significant services provided to birth parents. But if these are unsuccessful, parental rights are legally terminated, and the child becomes available for adoption.
And these kids might have been in foster care.
Yes, they may have lived in one or multiple foster homes, experiencing significant instability and trauma before finding a permanent adoptive placement. Many are older when adopted, carrying memories of their early lives.
And what are the identity challenges here? It sounds like there could be a lot of instability, maybe a fractured sense of belonging.
Indeed. The
Yeah.
core identity issues here are often quite profound, like where does this child fit? How do they develop a clear, stable sense of self when they've been moved from one foster family to another, potentially changing schools, neighborhoods, even names repeatedly?
Wow.
The very concept of home and family can be fluid and complex for them. There's also the challenge of maintaining contact with birth relatives, like siblings, grandparents, or other kinfolks who aren't deemed harmful by the system.
How does that contact fit in?
Well, the question becomes how that ongoing contact, or the absence of it, contributes to their emerging identity. And furthermore, they face the profound and emotionally taxing task of reconciling their relationship with birth parents who were abusive or neglectful, whose rights have been terminated.
That sounds incredibly difficult.
It's an incredibly complex emotional landscape to navigate, holding both love and betrayal, loss and hope, sometimes all at once.
Wow, that's incredibly complex. For a teacher, this context truly emphasizes how instability and early trauma can profoundly affect a child's sense of belonging, their self-concept, even their ability to form secure attachments in the classroom.
Absolutely.
You might observe behavioral impacts related to these transitions, or a child who is still trying to figure out what family truly means to them as their understanding of it is constantly evolving, maybe shifting between idealization and rejection.
Yeah, that push and pull.
Creating a highly predictable, safe, and emotionally responsive classroom environment becomes paramount for these children.
Definitely. Okay, our third type is international adoption. This practice gains significant momentum through humanitarian efforts after major global conflicts, like the Korean War, which left many children orphaned. Children from orphanages, or sometimes placed directly from birth families, are often adopted across national and cultural lines, creating unique complexities.
So the identity challenges here must be particularly focused on navigating cultural and racial differences, often very visibly.
Precisely. A distinct set of identity-related concerns emerges. How do these children make meaning of the fact that they may look visibly different from their adoptive parents and extended family?
Yeah, that's a big one.
This can lead to questions like, why don't I look like my parents? And where do I truly belong? How do they understand their connection to both their adoptive and birth families, especially when those families don't share a common language, cultural practices, or national heritage?
And ethical issues, too.
Yes, there are also complex ethical issues to grapple with, such as understanding the economic disparities or social policies in their birth country that might have led to their placement. For many, the challenge of searching for birth relatives across cultural divides and norms, where such a search could bring shame or even danger to birth parents, adds another layer of complexity.
So it's not just personal, it's global.
It's not just a personal quest, but one with global and ethical dimensions.
This directly relates to the elementary classroom, which is increasingly diverse.
More and more.
Imagine a child in your class who looks visibly different from their parents. Perhaps a child adopted from China by white American parents. How do you, as a teacher, foster an environment where this difference is acknowledged positively, where their cultural heritage is genuinely respected and celebrated without making the child feel like a token or an anomaly?
That's the critical balance.
It truly points to the importance of multicultural education that goes beyond surface-level celebrations, encouraging genuine understanding and respect for diverse family structures and backgrounds, providing mirrors and windows for all children in the curriculum.
Well said. Mirrors and windows.
Yeah.
And finally, we have kinship adoption. This is an increasingly common form where children whose biological parents cannot parent them are raised informally or legally adopted by relatives, grandparents, aunts, uncles, step-parents.
Okay, so staying within the family network.
Often, yes. In a step-parent adoption, for example, the child may continue to live with one biological parent while the step-parent formally adopts them. This is distinct because the child typically remains within their existing family network, but the legal and relational dynamics shift significantly.
So the identity questions here might be more about navigating existing family dynamics with a new legal framework rather than joining an entirely new family system.
Yes, that's a great way to put it. Identity questions often arise around the child's relations to the parent or parents whose rights were terminated, whether voluntarily or involuntarily.
Like, how do they see that parent now?
Exactly.
Yeah.
If a grandparent adopts their grandchild, how does the child reconcile their biological parent's status? What does it mean for a child to have a new last name, a new set of formal relatives, or for a biological parent to allow someone else to adopt them, especially if that biological parent is still in their life in some capacity?
So many questions about belonging and roles.
These are profound questions about belonging, lineage, and the redefinition of family roles and relationships within an already existing, often complex network. The shift might be subtle on the surface, but deeply impactful on their internal sense of self and family.
This certainly applies to the classroom context, too, underscoring the diversity of family structures.
Absolutely.
Think about children who might have different last names than their parents or siblings in the classroom, or a child who refers to their grandparent as mom or dad because that's their primary caregiver and legal parent.
You see that quite often.
This highlights the varied legal and relational complexities that can shape a child's family narrative and why it's so important for educators to be aware of the many forms families take, ensuring they create an inclusive environment for all students that respects and validates their unique family stories.
It's crucial.
These different worlds of adoption really underscore that there's no single story, but a rich tapestry of experiences, each thread contributing to a complex, beautiful, and sometimes challenging sense of self.
Beautifully put. Okay, so moving from the diverse types of adoption, let's turn our attention now to the various contexts in which adoptive identity development truly flourishes or, faces challenges.
The environment matters.
Hugely. Namely, family, community, and societal contexts. These layers profoundly influence how an adopted individual comes to understand themselves, weaving through their personal narratives.
So starting with family context.
Starting there, yes. And Erickson's foundational work in identity theory is highly relevant here.
His stages of development.
Exactly. He proposed that family environments set the crucial stage for identity formation, particularly as children enter adolescence. This isn't just about what they're told. It's about the emotional atmosphere, the unspoken rules, the ways communication happens.
It's the whole vibe.
It really is. This is a period where adolescents begin to redefine their relationships with parents or guardians, developing a sense of autonomy, modifying old commitments as they explore new paths in school, work, relationships. The family acts as the primary crucible in which the initial elements of self are forged.
So the family isn't just where identity is formed, but also where it's negotiated, expressed, where the first stories about oneself are told and retold.
Precisely. The early socialization process for adopted children typically involves what we call a family adoption story, or narrative.
Okay.
This story isn't just a recitation of facts. It communicates the facts that adoptive parents choose to disclose at a given time. But crucially, it also conveys subtle, often unspoken, positive or negative cues about the child's birth parents and their circumstances.
Like the tone of voice.
Exactly. Think about the tone of voice when speaking about birth parents, the amount of detail shared, or even the questions that are not answered. All these features, the words, the silences, the emotional tone, the comfort level with the topic, profoundly influence the child's developing narrative about themselves.
So if it feels like a secret.
If the topic of adoption feels like a secret or something shameful, that emotional resonance becomes part of the child's internal story.
And what shapes that family narrative?
Well, it's shaped by many things. Professional advice given to parents about what, how much, and when to tell.
Right.
And the family's overall comfort with acknowledging that adoptive parenting is inherently different from biological parenting. Think about Kirk's classic work from the 80s, which highlighted the importance of adoptive parents accepting and discussing the difference that adoption introduces.
So not pretending it's the same.
Right. Kirk argued that parents who acknowledged and accepted this difference, rather than trying to pretend their family was just like a biological family, fostered healthier outcomes for their children. This level of comfort with open discussion, with embracing difference rather than denying it, really serves as a significant part of the identity context.
It models acceptance.
It teaches the child that their origins are not something to be hidden or ashamed of, but an integral part of their unique story.
And as children grow, especially as they enter adolescence, their understanding of this family narrative isn't static, is it? It sounds like they might begin to reconsider it, question it, maybe deepen their understanding.
They absolutely do. As children develop abstract reasoning, that ability to think hypothetically, consider multiple perspectives, they begin to reflect on the complex legal, societal, relational, and even sexual meanings involved in adoption.
The what-ifs start coming up.
Exactly. Questions like, what if I met my birth parents? Or, do I have siblings I don't know? Arise. Missing information like the identities of birth parents or the specific reasons for placement can raise significant questions about the family narrative they've been given.
And discovering secrets.
That can be huge.
Yeah.
If a child discovers details about their adoption that were previously withheld, it can lead to profound questions about why that information was kept secret. Secrets about important personal information and the misleading narratives that accompany them can actually undermine a child's fundamental sense of self and belonging. Sometimes it's even experienced as traumatic, like a betrayal of trust.
Wow.
And even in families where adoption is openly discussed and affirmed, external comments from others,
Oh yeah, from outsiders.
perhaps a well-meaning but uninformed relative, a curious stranger, or even a teacher who says something insensitive, can challenge the child's established family narrative.
Like you don't look like your parents.
Exactly. Or, do you ever wonder about your real parents? Those are common examples. As adolescents integrate these issues, they begin the crucial, often difficult work of reframing their family adoption narrative, fitting it into their larger, evolving sense of self. This is part of that lifelong work of identity formation.
And what about difference within families? That must also play a big role in how identity is formed and how these narratives are constructed.
It does. Significantly. Adoption often becomes visible within families due to real or perceived differences in physical appearance, abilities, or personality between the adopted child and their adoptive parents.
Things you'd normally attribute to genetics?
Right. In biological families, these similarities and differences are often attributed to heredity or maybe an extended family member. Oh, you got your artistic talent from your great aunt Mildred. But in adoptive families, parent-child similarities and differences are obviously not due to heredity.
And sometimes people still try to guess.
And when nothing is known about a child's both parents, sometimes attributions are still made to hypothesized characteristics of birth family members. Your mother must have had hair just like that, even if they have no idea. Differences are particularly visible and often undeniable in families with children adopted transracially or transnationally.
So how families deal with these differences is key.
Incredibly important to the child's sense of self and belonging. Researchers like Kay, back in 1990, examined family discourse. They looked at high distinguishing families that explicitly emphasized the difference between adoptive and biological status
Okay.
versus low distinguishing families that minimized or even ignored it, trying to pretend the adopted child was biologically related.
And what did they find?
He found that both emphasizing and minimizing differences were associated with family problems and low adolescent self-esteem.
Both extremes were problematic.
Exactly. Both approaches, though seemingly opposite, can have negative consequences for identity development. Minimizing difference can invalidate an adoptee's lived experience and unique journey, while overemphasizing can other them, making them feel perpetually different or not truly part of the adoptive family.
So what's the optimal approach then? If neither extreme is good, how do families or even educators navigate this delicate balance?
The insight here is subtle but profound. The optimal approach, according to this research, is when differences are acknowledged without being emphasized in a way that separates or alienates.
Acknowledged but not dwelled upon.
Kind of. It means validating the adoptee's real experiences of difference, their unique origins, their different appearance, their questions, while simultaneously underscoring their connection, belonging, and full integration into the adoptive family.
So it's like yes and.
Precisely. It's about saying, yes, you have a unique story, and that's wonderful, and you are fully and completely our child, part of this family. It's a delicate balance, but crucial for fostering a healthy, integrated sense of identity. It's about finding strength in uniqueness while affirming belonging.
Here's where it gets particularly relevant for you as an educator. This is a key takeaway for anyone working with children.
Yeah, this is gold for teachers.
In a classroom, acknowledging and validating differences, whether they're differences in family structures, cultural backgrounds, learning styles, physical appearance, developmental pace, without making a student feel othered is absolutely crucial. How might a teacher gently facilitate conversations about family diversity that affirm all children?
Maybe focus on common themes.
Perhaps through projects that celebrate unique family characteristics rather than focusing on a standard family form, like creating family crests that include diverse elements, or by introducing diverse books that depict many kinds of families. The goal is to create an environment where every child's unique story is seen, valued, and integrated into the classroom community, making them feel like a complete and celebrated part of the whole.
Love that. Okay, moving beyond the immediate family, community and societal context also profoundly shape adoptive identity.
The wider world.
Exactly. Western societies, as social scientists point out, primarily rely on blood relations or biological ties to define kinship.
That's deeply ingrained.
It really is. This deeply ingrained cultural bias places adopted persons in a unique, sometimes problematic position because their familial ties are grounded in social, legal, and emotional bonds rather than purely biological relations. This challenges deeply ingrained societal assumptions about family, and adopted individuals often find themselves explaining, defending, or simply navigating these unspoken societal rules.
But with the rise of open adoption, it feels like those traditional, rigid boundaries are blurring, right? Is that making identity formation easier?
It certainly seems to be shifting things. An increasing number of infant adoptions, particularly in the U.S., are now open from the beginning. This means there's no pretense of the child passing as a biological child of the adoptive parents.
Birth parents might even be involved?
Absolutely. Birth mothers might choose the adoptive parents, they might be present at the birth, or maintain ongoing contact. This participation implies that adoptive parents are aware that their family's boundaries extend beyond the immediate household to a broader adoptive kinship network.
An extended network.
Yeah, that includes the adopted child, adoptive family members, and birth family members. This network can be a source of incredible richness and support. Some adoptive parents have even found that open adoption enhanced their role as parents
How so?
by giving them direct opportunities to discuss their children's origins, medical histories, birth relatives. It alleviates the burden of secrecy and empowers them with more information to share.
So, more info, less secrecy. But does it eliminate the questions?
That's a great question. While open adoptions certainly reduce the likelihood of secrets related to the circumstances of adoption and provide more direct access to information, they don't eliminate curiosity or questioning.
Still curious, just about different things.
Exactly. We've found that all adopted children are curious about their birth families, but the nature of their curiosity differs based on the degree of openness. For example, children in confidential or closed adoptions might wonder who their birth parents are and what they look like. It's driven by a desire for a missing piece of their origin story.
Okay.
Whereas children in open adoptions might wonder when their birth parents will visit next, or if they'll share more details about their birth and placement. Their curiosity is more relational, focused on the next chapter of their open relationship.
So it's a shift in the type of questions, not an absence of them.
Precisely. It underscores the ongoing nature of identity work.
This next point, about transracial and transnational adoption and its intersection with multiculturalism, sounds like it brings in even more profound layers of identity complexity, especially given visible differences.
It absolutely does. When children are adopted across racial or national lines, the adoptive families inherently become bicultural or multicultural. They're navigating more than one set of cultural norms, traditions, and often racial identities.
And the community matters here.
Hugely. The racial and cultural composition of the family's immediate community then largely determines whether their status as a transracially adopted family is a source of visible difference or not. Depending on that community context, adopted children can experience a wide range of reactions from open arms and acceptance to teasing, bullying, or even overt denigration.
So the community fit is crucial.
The fit of the adoptive family within its community and the community's general understanding of diversity significantly impacts the child's identity development and how they perceive their own place.
And this leads to that paradox.
Yes, this creates what's sometimes called the transracial adoption paradox. For a child of color adopted by white parents across racial or ethnic lines, society might view them as an ethnic minority or a person of color.
But they might not see themselves that way.
Yet, they might perceive themselves as members of the majority culture, having been raised in a white family and context, often benefiting from certain societal advantages or assumptions, often associated with the dominant culture aspects of white privilege. This can create a unique internal and external tension in their identity.
Treated one way, feel another.
They may be treated as a person of color by the broader world, but not identify with that group internally, or vice versa. These sometimes contradictory experiences can profoundly affect how identity development proceeds, especially during adolescence and young adulthood, when group affiliation becomes so critical.
So they might encounter significant challenges to their self-view when they move into new, more diverse environments, like college or a new city.
Precisely. Imagine a Korean child adopted into a predominantly white rural community who grew up feeling just like everyone else in their family and town.
Right.
They might suddenly find themselves in a large, multicultural urban area for college or a workplace where others might automatically categorize and socially respond to them as an Asian person or a person of color, a label that is discordant with their self-view or previous lived experience.
That must be jarring.
Very. Through these new social interactions, adopted adolescents may begin to explore or align with their biological parents' racial or ethnic groups, only to find they don't quite fit in because they don't know the language, the cultural values, the shared history.
Right, not the same lived experience.
Exactly. In response, or in addition, they might seek out adoption-related groups and affiliations with the adoption community, especially when their adoptive status or family membership is questioned or misunderstood by others. The rise of online communities has made this kind of exploration and connection much more accessible and validating for many.
That makes sense.
And this offers a truly rich discussion point for elementary educators, and it's a topic you can proactively address in your classroom to foster an inclusive environment.
How so?
Well, How might a teacher introduce diverse cultures and family structures to prepare all students for a multicultural world, and crucially, to support transracially adopted children in navigating potentially contradictory social perceptions?
What are some ideas?
You could invite diverse guest speakers who represent different cultures and family structures. Read books with varied family structures and cultural backgrounds that go beyond superficial representation. Broadly celebrate cultural holidays from around the world by delving into their meanings and traditions.
So, normalizing diversity.
These approaches help normalize and celebrate diversity, creating a more inclusive and empathetic environment for everyone and giving all children the tools to understand and respect different identity journeys.
And finally, on the community level, what about direct community support for adoptees? How does that factor into identity development?
That's a vital piece, especially for children adopted transracially or internationally. The availability of a community of similar individuals with whom they can identify and interact is crucial.
Like culture camps.
Exactly. Think about Korean culture camps, often organized by adoptive parents or agencies. These camps bring children from the same culture together for a concentrated period of time. They experience being with other children who look like them, eat foods from their culture, learn about customs, maybe some language.
That sounds really validating.
It can be incredibly validating, normalizing their appearance and heritage. But availability is one thing. The child and parents also need to be interested. And the community itself must be welcoming.
Welcoming is key.
Sometimes members of the child's ethnic community may not be interested in interacting with the adopted child, who might be seen as different from them as well as their adoptive parents. This experience of non-acceptance or a feeling of being not quite enough in either world also directly influences identity development, adding another layer of complexity to their narrative.
Wow. Okay, here's where it gets particularly insightful. Let's talk about adoptive identity theory, the psychological framework.
The underpinnings.
And we start, fittingly, with Erik Erikson, whose work laid so much of the groundwork for understanding identity across the lifespan.
Yes, Erikson's work provides the foundational lens through which much of modern identity theory is understood. His fifth psychosocial stage, identity versus role confusion, is centered in adolescence and the transition to adulthood.
That critical teenage period.
Right. This is a profound period of rapid neurological, emotional, cognitive changes where youth are called upon by both internal developmental pushes and external societal demands to explore and make crucial decisions about education, career paths, personal ideology, interpersonal relationships.
There's a lot going on.
A huge amount. The theory holds that forming a coherent and meaningful sense of identity, a solid understanding of who I am that feels true and integrated in concert with one's social and cultural environment, is absolutely central to healthy psychological adjustment during this stage and, indeed, throughout life. It's the central developmental task of this period.
Central task, got it.
And what's essential to grasp about Erikson's theory is that it's epigenetic. Meaning the central themes of each developmental stage, like trust versus mistrust in infancy or autonomy versus shame in early childhood, influence current and subsequent stages. Think of it like building a skyscraper. The strength and integrity of each floor, each developmental stage, depend on the one below it.
So early stuff matters later.
Exactly. While you might be focused on the penthouse, the adult identity issues or unresolved challenges in the foundation, those earlier stages, can still impact the entire structure, requiring a revisit or integration later in life. Identity development isn't a one-and-done event in adolescence.
It's lifelong.
It's a lifelong process, with these core themes and questions being revisited and refined across the lifespan, always at the intersection of the individual and their changing social context.
So it's never really finished then. It keeps evolving, adjusting to new experiences and stages of life.
Precisely. And it's also profoundly psychosocial. The challenges inherent in each developmental stage arise from the dynamic interaction between individual development, their physiological, cognitive, emotional growth, and the demands and expectations of society.
Individual meets society.
Right. In contemporary Western societies, for instance, adolescence and emerging adulthood are times when young people are expected to move towards occupational futures, become responsible citizens by developing political and value stances, mature into relationship partners as they consider family formation. Each of these societal demands interacts with the individual's internal growth to shape their identity.
And it's dynamic. Different parts matter at different times.
Exactly. Identity development is dynamic because each domain, occupational, political, relational, has its own developmental course and can wax and wane in importance over time. Now, here's a critical distinction, especially for our discussion on adoption.
Okay.
Most early identity research focused on aspects of identity over which adolescents had some degree of choice, like choosing a career path, forming religious beliefs, developing relationship views.
Things you decide on.
Right. More recently, however, there's been growing interest in understanding assigned identities, where the individual has little to no choice about a particular identity domain.
Like?
This includes aspects like gender, ethnicity, sexual orientation, or, as we're discussing today, adoptive status. These are aspects of self that are given, not chosen.
So for an adopted person, the question isn't, do I choose this identity as an adopted person, but rather something far deeper and more complex. It's about integrating something that is fundamentally part of who they are, but wasn't a choice they made.
Exactly. For an assigned identity, the question fundamentally shifts from, do I choose this identity, to, what does this identity mean to me? How do I integrate this unchosen foundational aspect into my overall sense of self, my life story?
That's a huge shift in perspective.
It's a fundamental aha moment for many in understanding identity. For you, as an elementary education major, understanding Erickson's foundational stages helps you grasp the entire developmental journey of children, from their earliest experiences of trust to their struggles for autonomy.
Great.
And realizing the concept of assigned identity, like gender, ethnicity, or being adopted, can be a profound insight. It demonstrates how some core aspects of self are not chosen, but must be profoundly integrated and understood by the individual.
It changes how you support them.
It changes the way we think about supporting identity development in all children. It highlights that some children are grappling with questions of origin and belonging that others may not encounter in the same way, and that their task is one of understanding and integrating, rather than choosing.
So building on that, how does this Ericksonian framework specifically apply to adoptive identity development through a narrative approach? How does an adoptee perform this integration?
Right, because adoptive status is an assigned rather than a chosen identity. Adoptive identity development involves coming to terms with adoption within the specific context of the adopted family and the culture into which one has been adopted.
Coming to terms of it.
It adds an extra layer of complexity, an additional developmental task, to the overall identity process that non-adopted individuals don't typically face. The questions we started with, who am I as an adopted person? What does being adopted mean to me? How does this fit? They really underscore this additional work of integration and meaning-making.
And adolescence is a key time for this.
Like other aspects of identity, adoptive identity development is particularly stimulated during adolescence by both internal and external factors. Cognitive changes, like developing hypothetical reasoning, that what-if thinking. And biological changes, like emerging sexual interest, which naturally leads to curiosity about one's genetic origins and potential offspring. These naturally evoke deeper curiosity in adopted individuals about their origins and the implications their past might have for their future. So adolescence is indeed a normative time for this specific form of identity exploration to intensify.
But you mentioned earlier it's a lifelong task. Does it ever truly stop, or is it something that keeps unfolding across the years?
It's definitely a lifelong task.
Yeah.
The individual's evolving sense of self continues to interact with contextual challenges across the entire life course. New questions can arise at any point, even well into adulthood or old age.
Like triggered by life events.
Exactly. For example, a serious illness might prompt a frantic search for medical history information about birth parents that was previously unknown. Or the death of adoptive parents might trigger a renewed pursuit of birth relatives, as the original familial anchor shifts. Life transitions like marriage, having children, a significant career change, these can also cause individuals to revisit and reevaluate their adoptive identity.
So it's cyclical, not linear.
The process is cyclical, not linear. New information or new life stages can prompt a fresh round of reflection and integration.
And the narrative approach helps make sense of this.
Our approach, and that of many contemporary researchers, views adoptive identity development through a narrative lens. Narrative psychology fundamentally focuses on meaning-making. It asks, how is one's personal narrative about adoption socially constructed, and how does that narrative help the person truly know where he or she fits into the world?
Finding their place through story.
Yes. The process of meaning-making is visibly evident in adoptive identity exploration. As adopted persons reflect on the meaning and impact of adoption on their lives, take active steps to gather information, and then work to construct that meaningful, coherent narrative. So we can truly say exploration is the work of identity. It's the active process of weaving together the diverse threads of one's life into a cohesive story.
That makes so much sense. It's about actively building that story. And I imagine emotion plays a huge, often unseen role in the storytelling, doesn't it? Tell us about emotion and narrative adoptive identity development.
You're absolutely right. Emotion is not just a byproduct. It's a driving force in narrative construction. Von Korf's model, building on seminal ideas in narrative identity research, emphasizes the profound links between emotion, narrative identity, and the interactive family processes at the heart of its construction.
Family interactions again.
Yes, a fundamental premise of this model is that identity forms over time as parents facilitate social interactions that are emotionally meaningful to their children. These interactions aren't just about sharing facts, they're about sharing feelings, validating experiences, co-creating meaning.
And adoption is a rich context for this.
Adoption provides an ideal context to examine this model because it often involves intensely emotional experiences. Openness arrangements, for example, offer a rich source of variation in family context due to the dramatically different amounts of information shared and types of contact experienced.
Right, lots of different emotional possibilities.
These diverse arrangements create different relational contexts in which adoptive identity develops. Crucially, contact between children's adoptive and birth relatives provides an incredibly emotionally vivid and meaningful form of social interaction for adoptees.
So meeting birth relatives can be intense.
Our research has shown that young people who have met their birth mothers report a wide range of emotions after these meetings: pleasure, happiness, anxiety, apprehension, joy, even extreme elation. These are not minor emotions. They are deeply felt and impactful.
So these powerful, often complex emotional experiences then fuel the narrative building. They become the raw material for the story.
Exactly. Emotional experiences are critical to narrative identity formation because they lead directly to conversational sharing.
People need to talk about big feelings.
Generally, yes. People who experience strong emotions generally feel compelled to tell the story of their experiences to others, often repeatedly, and most frequently with trusted family members. Given the vast range and number of emotions associated with birth-family contact, from profound relief to deep anxiety, such contact offers significantly more opportunities for adopted persons to engage in meaningful, adoption-related storytelling about themselves with their adoptive family members.
So those conversations are key.
This adoption-related conversation, particularly between adoptees and their adoptive parents, is proposed to be a key factor in the process of adoptive identity formation, as it's where the raw emotions are processed and integrated into a coherent story.
And how does sharing help shape the story?
Well, identity research indicates that conversational sharing helps narrative identity by providing young people with opportunities to reconstruct past events. This isn't about fabricating details, but about how our memories naturally organize and prioritize certain details to fit our evolving understanding.
Making sense of it now.
It's how we shape our personal history into a coherent story that makes sense to us now, a process that constantly updates. During these conversations, people rehearse, recall, maybe even invent information consistent with their current understanding, while perhaps neglecting or forgetting inconsistent information.
Interesting.
These conversations about adoption, often sparked by emotions, are especially important during adolescence, a period when autobiographical reasoning develops in concert with narrative identity.
Autobiographical reasoning.
It's essentially our mind's ability to connect our past experiences, our memories, and our understanding of those events into a coherent, evolving story about who we are. It's how we make sense of our personal history and see how it shapes our present self, allowing us to connect the dots.
And the quality of the conversation matters.
The quality of these parent-child adoption-related conversations, things like their elaboration, their emotional depth, their frequency, is directly linked to the coherence of adoptive identity narratives. Conversations, whether parent-child or peer-to-peer, help children construct self-stories, playing a vital role in developing autobiographical reasoning and a robust self-concept.
And processing the emotions.
Furthermore, how young people interpret and give meaning to their emotional experiences, how they label those emotions, changes as they share, reshape, and reinterpret them in conversation with parents and others. Thus, emotional expression serves as a powerful means of organizing identity narratives and conveying meaning to both the self and others. It's the glue that binds the facts and experiences into a coherent, felt story.
That's incredibly insightful. For elementary teachers, this has direct and profound applications for every child in their classroom.
Yes, think about the classroom dynamic.
How can we, as educators, create safe spaces for emotional expression and conversational sharing in our classrooms without prying?
Gentle approaches.
It could be through something as simple as using check-in circles, where students briefly share how they're feeling, allowing time for sharing personal stories related to curriculum themes, like talking about family traditions during a cultural unit, or providing open-ended narrative prompts for writing that encourage reflection on personal experiences.
Building general skills.
Exactly. This fosters general meaning-making skills and emotional literacy, which are vital for all children, regardless of their background, including those navigating complex identity questions. The goal, of course, isn't to force personal disclosure, but to build a culture of open communication where students feel comfortable processing and sharing their experiences in a supported environment, strengthening their ability to construct their own coherent self-stories.
That's beautifully articulated. Okay, now that we've delved into the theory, let's explore some practical applications and interventions aimed at supporting adoptive identity formation.
Okay, what helps?
It's crucial to start with a caution. There is no one-size-fits-all approach.
Right, we established that earlier.
Adoptive identity narratives are highly varied. Adoption is not equally salient for all adoptees, nor do all experience the same feelings with equal intensity or at the same stages of life. The path toward adoptive identity is nonlinear and can extend well into adulthood, with new questions and needs arising at different life transitions.
So interventions need to be flexible.
Therefore, interventions must be cautious, flexible, and highly individualized, always respecting the individual's unique journey.
So what's salient for one adopted person might not be relevant or interesting for another, even if their adoption circumstances are similar.
Exactly. Differences in the salience of adoptive identity compared to other identity domains like their occupation, their role as a parent, or their political views can lead to varying interests and engagement with adoption-related themes.
How does that play out?
Well, for some, adoptive identity might be central, drawing them to adoption-related careers or advocacy. Others might find profound connections to their religion through adoption, seeing it as God's will or a divinely guided path. Searching for birth relatives might be seen as absolutely necessary for some to feel complete or answer lingering questions,
But not for others.
but entirely irrelevant to others who feel perfectly whole within their adoptive family. Similarly, while some internationally adopted youth benefit greatly from cultural resources like culture camps or homeland tours, others may not be comfortable with these activities or feel no personal connection to them.
So you really have to follow the individual's lead.
Because there's no single prescribed course for adoptive identity development, interventions must carefully consider each individual's characteristics, goals, current needs, and the available family and community resources. Professionals also need to be acutely aware of the different levels of background information available based on the type of adoption, international versus domestic, open versus closed, and how openly adoption is discussed within their families.
And that lack of information is a common challenge.
One of the most common challenges adopted persons experience is a perceived lack of complete and accurate information about themselves. This often includes crucial details about their placement and foster care histories, their birth parents' identities and circumstances, health histories, genetic backgrounds, the precise reasons they were placed.
Vital missing pieces.
It can feel like vital missing pieces to their life puzzle. And the availability of this information varies significantly by the type of adoption. Those adopted domestically as infants in recent decades may have potential for the most information, especially with open adoptions and DNA testing.
Oh, not always.
But some states still have closed records, and many adults adopted earlier have very little info. Children from the child welfare system often face fragmented information, losing details through moves or administrative gaps.
And international adoption.
Highly variable. Some abandoned children have absolutely no information, while others from well-run children's homes might have quite a bit of medical or social history.
So if there's this frequent, sometimes profound lack of information, what are some alternative pathways to identity formation beyond just finding birth relatives? What other resources can help build that coherent narrative?
That's a key question. Contact with birth relatives is certainly one powerful pathway, and for many, deeply significant. However, it's definitely not the only one.
Okay.
Consistent with the theory of emotion and narrative adoptive identity, there are many other forms of meaningful adoption-related social interactions that can help young people develop a coherent, robust narrative.
Like what?
Through the efforts of their adoptive parents, for instance, young people can form friendships with others of similar cultural backgrounds, engage with cultural institutions that celebrate their heritage, or connect with post-adoption support services and groups.
Finding community.
These activities all increase opportunities for adoptees to engage in meaningful, adoption-related conversations with others, peers, mentors, other adults who understand their experience, enhancing their ability to explore, reflect on, and integrate their adoptive identity. It's about finding community and shared understanding.
So what are some specific interventions?
Let's look at some specific interventions that have proven beneficial. A straightforward one to deal with the lack of background information, particularly for children in the child welfare system, is the preparation of a life book.
Oh, I've heard of these. They sound like a really tangible, hands-on way to capture a child's story, especially if they've experienced multiple placements.
They are, and they can be incredibly powerful. A life book is a preventative or promotive intervention that contains documents, photos, notes, greeting cards, school awards, artwork, other memorabilia, basically things that help children know and keep more of their histories.
A portable autobiography.
Exactly. Ideally, a life book is started at the child's birth or upon entry into the foster care system and maintained by social workers, foster parents, adoptive parents throughout the child's life, moving with the child from one placement to the next.
So it provides some consistency.
While there may always be open questions for adoptees, a life book provides a concrete, consistent account of their personal history and the loving adults who have cared for them. But it's most beneficial when combined with opportunities to converse with significant others about the meaning and significance of their experiences.
The book plus the conversation.
As narrative identity is co-constructed through dialogue, the book provides the scaffolding for the conversation.
That makes sense.
And as an educator with an elementary education background, you could easily adapt the life book concept for all students, not just those who are adopted.
How would that look?
Encouraging them to create My Life story journals or portfolios throughout the school year. This helps children organize their personal histories, celebrate their unique journeys, develop self-narratives, and autobiographical reasoning skills. You could include sections for photos, drawings of family, notes about important events, reflections on favorite memories.
So it benefits everyone.
It's a practice that's highly beneficial for all children by fostering a sense of their own narrative and personal history and normalizing the idea that everyone has a unique, evolving story.
That's a fantastic practical idea, and it ties beautifully into another intervention, therapeutic writing.
Indeed. The social construction and narrative approaches to identity have consistently highlighted the therapeutic value of writing, particularly about difficult or emotionally laden experiences.
Research supports this.
Yeah, research by Pennebaker, for example, has shown that writing about emotion-laden topics for even a short period each day can produce beneficial changes in immune function, heart rate, distress levels, and various other physical and psychological outcomes. It's a powerful way to process.
And in the adoption world?
The adoption field is rich with memoirs, blogs, documentaries by adoptees, and the writers and artists themselves often report significant personal benefits, calling it free therapy, a path to enlightenment, a source of support and connection with others who share similar experiences.
Giving voice to experience.
It offers a powerful outlet for processing complex emotions and experiences, transforming inner turmoil into a coherent narrative.
This speaks directly to your elementary education background. Teachers can incorporate various forms of journaling, personal narrative writing, or reflective writing prompts into their curriculum.
For all kids.
Exactly. This fosters emotional processing and self-expression for all students. For example, a simple feelings journal or daily check-in writing prompt like, what was the best part of my day, or what's on my mind today, can provide a beneficial tool for any student to make meaning of their experiences. It offers a safe, structured way to explore thoughts and feelings without having to articulate them verbally in front of others.
Building literacy around narrative and emotion.
Right. It's about building general literacy around personal narrative and emotion, not about specific adoption-focused interventions.
Then there's conversational recounting, which we touched on earlier. Work by people like Dr. Robin Fedish and Dr. Peggy Pasapathy has been really influential here.
Talking it through.
Pasapathy proposed a model linking the social construction of one's personal past to healthy adult development. She posited that conversational recounting with other people contributes significantly to the social construction of autobiographical memory. In essence, talking about past experiences, sharing our stories, helps us integrate them into our current identity, allowing us to process and organize complex events.
And it sounds like this can help maintain a stable identity or incorporate change and new information into one's existing narrative.
Exactly. Conversational recounting opens the door for both maintaining stability in one's identity and incorporating change or new, sometimes challenging, information. It's also a core component of reminiscence therapy in older adults, where recalling and integrating past experiences contributes to successful aging and a coherent life story.
How does that work?
The act of verbally sharing a memory, receiving feedback, and retelling it helps solidify and shape that memory's meaning within the individual's broader narrative.
So in an elementary classroom, you could encourage peer-to-peer discussions or small group sharing within a supportive environment where students can recount experiences related to a topic or theme, perhaps in a share your weekend circle or a discussion after reading a story.
Absolutely.
It's a gentle way to foster these essential meaning-making conversations and build a sense of community where stories are valued.
Definitely. Now, for international adoptees, culture camps and homeland tours are specific interventions that have emerged as a direct response to concerns about cultural identity retention for children adopted transnationally or transracially.
Right, addressing that specific need.
There's a recognized need to help these children connect with their heritage.
How do they work and what do they aim to achieve?
Culture camps typically bring together a number of children from the same culture, along with their adoptive families, for a concentrated period, often a weekend or a week.
What happens there?
They experience being with other children who look like them, eat foods from their culture, learn about cultural customs, listen to traditional music, maybe learn some language. It creates a space where their unique background is the norm, not the exception.
Does it help?
There's some evidence that these culture camps can significantly improve children's sense of ethnic identity and belonging. However, adoptive parents also report that children's interest levels vary significantly. Some love them and eagerly anticipate them, while others want nothing to do with them,
Again, individual differences.
highlighting the individualized nature of identity. Homeland tours involve visits back to the child's country of origin, offering a direct, immersive experience of their birth culture and history.
While a teacher can't organize a culture camp or a homeland tour, they can certainly ensure their classroom reflects cultural diversity respectfully and authentically.
Yes, creating that inclusive space.
For example, celebrating a variety of cultural festivals, having culture corners where students can share elements of their heritage completely optional, allowing for varying comfort levels, or inviting diverse guest speakers from various backgrounds helps normalize and celebrate diversity for all students.
And that can be particularly supportive for transracially adopted children navigating those potentially contradictory social perceptions.
Right. It builds a classroom culture that validates multiple backgrounds and encourages broad cultural literacy.
Finally, we have the emergence of adult adoptee organizations. As the population of international adoptees, particularly those from the post-Korean War era, grows older, many are turning to each other for ongoing support and opportunities to engage in deeper identity work.
Finding peers later in life.
Examples include adult Korean adoptee gatherings that started in the late 90s, bringing together hundreds of adults adopted in earlier decades, some of whom were meeting other Korean adoptees for the first time.
What are the benefits of these organizations for adults who have already done so much identity work throughout their lives?
They provide invaluable opportunities for the ongoing social construction of identity, both in structured workshops and in informal socialization with peers who truly understand their unique journey. These pioneers are also providing new information on factors that may be helpful in forming healthy, adoptive, and ethnic identities, essentially mapping out the later stages of adoptive identity development from their lived experience.
Creating community and knowledge.
Those organizations have now been created by adults adopted from various countries and backgrounds, all for the explicit purpose of creating community, sharing experiences, offering mutual support, and continuing their collective and individual identity journeys. They become a powerful source of shared narrative and validation.
That sounds incredibly valuable.
As we wrap up this deep dive into adoptive identity, let's briefly recap our journey. We've seen that it's a profoundly personal, nonlinear, and lifelong process,
Lifelong is key.
often driven by an innate curiosity about one's origins and a deep desire for wholeness. The critical role of narrative construction, how individuals actively reflect, gather information, build a meaningful, coherent story about themselves, is absolutely central to this process.
Story building.
We've explored the profound influence of different adoption contexts, from domestic infant adoptions to kinship adoptions, each presenting unique challenges and opportunities for identity development.
The diverse worlds.
And we've underscored the immense power of family communication, particularly emotionally meaningful conversations, and broader community and societal contexts in shaping this intricate identity journey. Understanding these diverse experiences is not just academically interesting, it's absolutely crucial for fostering inclusive, empathetic environments in all aspects of life.
So what does this all mean for you, listening as someone with this elementary education background and a deep interest in identity and psychology?
Yeah, bring it back to the classroom.
This deep dive reminds us that every child, every single person sitting in your classroom and interacting with you beyond its walls is constantly constructing their unique story. They're weaving together facts, feelings, experiences into the narrative of who I am.
It's happening all the time.
This makes you realize the profound impact of your role. What seemingly small interactions, what gentle conversations, or what shared narratives you facilitate or allow in a classroom might be unknowingly shaping the coherence and richness of a child's lifelong sense of self.
It's a big responsibility.
It's a powerful thought, isn't it? That our interactions, however brief, however seemingly insignificant, truly contribute to the intricate tapestry of someone's identity, especially for those navigating complex origin stories.
Every interaction matters.
We encourage you to continue exploring the fascinating dynamics and lifelong process of identity formation in all its forms. There's always more to learn, and the insights gained from understanding adoptive identity offer a profound window into the universal human quest to answer that fundamental question. Who am I?
Keep asking the questions.
Thanks for diving deep with us today.